Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Monday Morning Mojo. I'm Anna Gibbs, and I'm really glad you're here. I'm also really glad that I have my friend and colleague, Antoinette Perez, joining me today. Antoinette and I have known each other for many years. She is part of the Keller Williams community, and I probably first met her not long after I joined the company 14 years ago. And Antoinette helps professionals really embrace public speaking and look at training as a profession and really help us to elevate our presence in front of others and so much more. So I'm so glad you could join me today, Antoinette. Thank you again for being on Mojo.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about what you have dedicated these last, 10, 15 years of your career, maybe more, to really helping all of us become better presenters, communicators, better trainers. Why is that so important for you? And you do it so well, but why is that so important for you?
Thank you. This has been going on a long time. You said 10 or 15 years, but I actually think it's beyond 20 at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you've already mentioned the Keller Williams affiliation, so I think that's a good place to start.
Sure.
I had been asked to teach as a certified faculty instructor a number of different courses. And so I was doing some of the core, business planning and things like that. I was asked to facilitate a train the trainer workshop for them. And it was really intimidating for me at first because I know that when I went through that course, I had this expectation that everything we were learning, the person at the front of the room was also modeling. And that was really scary to me to think that exactly. I was giving people like the clues for what to look for and that I had to deliver on those. And it ended up becoming a really excellent challenge for me and something that I love to do. Starting on that journey 20 years ago meant that I started meeting people out in the field who were in very brand new entry-level type roles in their market centers and regions. So for instance, I would meet teaching at a market center, the whole leadership team, including the, say, 22-year-old new college graduate answering the phones at the front desk. And over time, I might get invited back a couple years later and see that that person had moved into an agent services role. And when they went through and gave their presentation, they weren't the brand new nervous person. They were building confidence along the way. And then a couple of years after that, they're the assistant team leader or the team leader, and they are really leading. Watching people's trajectory over the 2 days is awesome. I think you've been through the course enough times, that that's a really transformative experience for a lot of people. But for me, having done this for 20 plus years, you see people go from that scared new baby deer in the headlights to someone who's running multiple businesses. And it's so gratifying.
Do you think a fear of public speaking is still at the top of the list for individuals? They say that's like the greatest fear is public speaking.
Yeah, I think that probably is true. Also, I wonder sometimes in 2026, we're watching an entire generation of which my own child is a member, struggling through years of pandemic and lockdown and sort of challenges to building social skills. And so I'm just kind of curious about how all that's going to play out in the long term.
But you just brought up something that makes me curious because I've always been very comfortable in front of people, yet I've learned a lot from you about fine-tuning a lot of my presentation skills and delivery and presence. And I think for a lot of us who started in our careers 20, 30, 35 years ago, the world was very different. And today, it's not uncommon for people to throw up a video or 1,000 and communicate a lot on Zoom and calls like this. And technology has become such a big part of how we do things. And so I'm curious, I wonder how that's affected the way people look at communication, look at presenting or public speaking. It's certainly happening more and more than it ever did before in many different ways.
Those are great questions to ask.
We don't have all the answers.
I don't. I have a lot of observations, right? And I also ask a lot of questions too. There are young people who seem incredibly comfortable in front of a camera, so natural. And then when we invite them to the front of the room to deliver off the cuff, it's a new environment for them. They're not used to only having one take. They're used to having infinite numbers of takes and picking the best one of 100 or doing it over and over until they get it exactly right. So that has been an interesting observation. Although I'll also admit to you that most young people that come through my workshops are not like seasoned social media influencers, but they're comfortable. They're comfortable in front of cameras. I think another question that I've had recently, though, just in this past 6 months or so, is how AI is shaping writing talks and practicing talks and delivering talks and the evolution of our own voice, if you will. I've noticed a couple of times where, folks have gotten up to give speeches, keynotes even, and they kind of lose their way and it seems like they can't find their way back. And I don't know if part of that is that whatever they've planned to tell us has not been constructed by them and internalized by them through that process of writing.
Yeah, that I'm sure is extremely possible. And I was going to ask you what your thoughts were about AI today in the business world, especially in the creative space, because I use AI every day and it does help me. I think for me, it's a strategic thought partner. I flush out ideas. It helps me with some things around organization. I just wrote a book. I wrote the book. I did not write the book. However, did I use a little editing in AI at times when I thought this paragraph is just not flowing right? I will admit that, yes, there's probably 10 or 15% of the book that I sort of massaged a little bit. But what are your thoughts around that? And, because that can be really challenging. If you didn't birth the thought, it's really difficult for you to connect with the message in a way that makes it very authentic and off the cuff.
I'll first frame this comment by saying I don't have all the answers for everybody. I've been very judicious about how I have approached using AI for myself in my own work and in my own everything, creative process and all of that. You can actually see, even with ChatGPT, one of my earliest chats years ago with the bot. I always call it the robot. Whatever AI I'm working with is the robot.
So you're not giving it a human name, right?
No human name. But the robot will show you that like my earliest attempt at trying to figure out what it was about was character development. And now I'm going to say it and it's going to be in your podcast and maybe this transcript will get copied over and over again, but whatever, chat's got a copy of it anyway. The idea was that there was a capybara, the animal, the capybara.
Yeah.
Friendly to all, very calm demeanor, fuzzy, cute, unusual looking, all of that. And what I knew was that this character at night would become something that many people will accidentally confuse the capybara for because of the word, and it would become at night chupacabra. So I wanted ChatGPT to help me brainstorm a little bit more about character development. What does he look like? What is he wearing? Who are his friends, right? And it was a really good, as you say, like a thought partner for that. It brought up ideas I hadn't really thought about. And, that's the beauty of some of these large language models that are being trained on other people's ideas, is that you're bringing a collective set of ideas of many other people to your brainstorming. So, I kind of like it for that. I think that's probably a good, responsible use for me personally in my own creative work. I also wrote a book, and it was published in August of 25. So I'm kind of going into some of the detail because I did use AI to help me in my thinking, but the end product is all me as well. I want to say it was a year prior, so like September, October of 2024. I, for instance, needed help batting around titles. It was great for me to have a working title for the book while I was writing the manuscript, but even the title that was my working title that was AI generated, I didn't really like in the end, and I ended up picking my own title anyway.
Yeah.
There were a couple of examples of that, right? Just like asking AI, what do you think? I need 10 ideas. And it just helps me get started. In writing workshops, I find that sometimes if I don't have ideas about a closing activity, I can't even get started filling in the blanks of the rest of the workshop. So I put into AI one time when I reached a sticking point, give me 10 ideas for a closing activity for this. It gave me 10 ideas. I used none of them. But just having that confidence of, well, I've got some options to choose from got me off the starting block. And
I think that's
So,
what I mean by a thought partner, right?
mhm,
It just kind of allows the flow sometimes
right,
to
right.
get started.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've had mixed feelings about AI in terms of how it helps me write. I
Hmm.
actually don't know that I like most of what comes out of AI after I'm done with it. A couple of times, I guess I've tried Claude recently, and I have liked the polish of what has come out on the other end from time to time. But even the book, I hired a human editor who
Me
went through 2 or 3 rounds of edits with
Yes.
me. I
Yes.
thought it was really helpful to have a human perspective and
Yeah.
someone like my target audience was young people my son's age, and this editor had 2 children same age, so
Mhm.
target audience as well. And I just thought that was all really helpful. The robots don't have children.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Yes, I worked with a human editor and publisher. So let's talk about your book because that was one of the things I wanted to get into because
Sure.
in addition to being an educator, a coach, and a workshop facilitator yourself and
Hmm.
a keynote speaker, you've been writing. I know you've been creating content
Hmm.
for a long time. The book I have in mind is Tiny Talks, Big Impact.
Hmm.
And that is your first publication?
Yeah, so technically I self-published with a partner, a pregnancy organizer and a baby organizer, and we're talking
Wow.
20 plus years ago. If I remember correctly, it was 2004 or 2005 that the pregnancy organizer was published. And then a couple years after that, the baby organizer. And that was a really great process. That was a really awesome opportunity to experience what that was like. It was a very specialty product, though. Like right now, we have the benefit of print on demand options like Amazon, KDP, and
Oh,
all sorts of different options, right? But back then you didn't. And what we had needed a specific weight of paper. We needed specific number of colors. It was highly graphic. And in fact, we didn't even end up selling mostly through traditional bookstore channels. We went through like baby boutiques, and
oh,
that's where
wow.
most of those sales happened. So it was an awesome opportunity to learn. But yeah, I would say, a lot changed in 20 years. I don't know how many of those lessons I necessarily was able to carry into this last book. So for all intents and purposes, if you wanted to be technical about it, then Tiny Talks is my first nonfiction solo outing.
What inspired you to write the book?
I had been writing notes for myself starting in I want to say 16. I would facilitate a workshop, and then I would think this would really take that to the next level. And then I would make a note, and I kept it all in this little notebook. I did a lot of writing in 2016 and 2019, and what I thought I was writing was my own workshop, not one that was affiliated with a client or with another company, but my own. I feel like it was in 2024. I was chatting with a bunch of friends, and we all realized that what we had in common was the idea for a book, a goal, some loose, undefined goal that was never pinned to a deadline to write a book, and just kind of all challenged each other to do it. So we did a book writing challenge in November of 2024 for 1 month. And so I set a
Oh,
goal for 1,000 words a day for 30 days. And I hit it, which
oh,
really 1 or 2 days I think I missed, but there were other days where I had written more than 1,000. And so collectively at the end of the month, I had 30,700 something words in the manuscript. Ultimately, I edited it down to like 22,000. But
and what I think is important to distinguish here is that while you could certainly help any of us become a professional speaker, prepare for a TEDx talk, I know that it's also very important to you. And I think you're very passionate about helping people just improve their everyday communication. Improve because as professionals, we're all having some very important conversations throughout the day, whether it's with a team member, a client, in a boardroom. So, talk to us a little bit about what you have for us in the book and why it is important for us to look at this skill. And because I think for me, it's always come very naturally. I look at myself
Mhm.
as a communicator. And when I look at my career, starting in sales, recruiting, it's all about the communication and the power of language and the power of words. And as a coach, and I've really always embraced that. I don't know if everyone thinks about that in the same context. So, talk to us a little bit about what you share in the book and why you're passionate about helping professionals elevate their game.
Thank you. You're actually giving me an opportunity to finish my answer to your previous
Okay.
question, which was like, why did it become a book instead of a workshop? I had a couple of things happen at about the same time in 2024 where my own son was trying to figure out how he was going to move out into the world as a young professional. And it was easy for me to remember in my early 20s and my initial days in the professional world being tapped to go speak at an executive meeting, to go in and present a project that I had been working on. I had actually been asked to create a training program pretty early in my 20s, having not done much public speaking or instruction or training myself. So as you do in the 90s, right, you let loose in a bookstore or a library.
Right.
Those were our two primary ways to get information. And I had to pull a lot of information from different resources, little bits from here and little bits from there. So the goal was to kind of target that young 20-something first professional job audience with the tiny handbook that they need with just the essentials. I, of course, had a secondary audience, which is in my own private speaker coaching. I tend to attract a lot of more mid-career professionals who have successfully avoided public speaking up until their, mid-30s, late 30s, where they're starting to realize that if they don't get better, then they're limiting their own opportunity to grow and to move into additional roles. So I guess that's one answer to your second question. How important is it to have these skills? Ultimately, yes, great communication is good all the time. I have people that come through the Train the Trainer workshops that will tell me a year later, whenever I see them next, that they were able to transfer those skills into a volunteer opportunity, into a leadership opportunity in their community, whatever. So all of those things are transferable, but ultimately, if we're talking United States, great communication, verbal communication is a leadership skill. People tend to listen to you. They tend to allow you to influence them more when they perceive you as someone who's confident and trustworthy and has their head on straight, if you will.
Yeah. And the title of your book, very intentional, I'm sure, Tiny Talks, Big Impact. Why do you believe that the smallest conversations often become the most important ones?
We live in a time right now where there's a lot of word clutter and word noise in the air. I do think that we got accustomed from the early pandemic to just gathering in Zoom out of habit and not necessarily because there was a message to deliver. And I don't think I see it as much now, but certainly in the later pandemic years, 2023, that kind of thing, there were a lot of Zoom meetings that I would go into where it felt like we were gathering, but I wasn't clear what the reason was. I wasn't clear what the message was.
We were
and I think we
have meetings.
Yeah. And we see that now. There's no shortage of content on social media channels, regular media channels, where you sit down and you watch and you consume. And at the end of it, you're like, wait, what was the point of all this? Why was I here? What was I supposed to get from it?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of brevity. I'm a big fan of being prepared so you can walk in and make as much of a statement as possible in as few words as possible. I think it does make you unique today to say something really powerful in a very few words.
Yeah. Well, and I think for a lot of people, their attention span is not what it used to be. There's so much information coming at us that I find that I also at times can check out of a conversation. So I appreciate the brevity and getting to the bottom line.
Yes.
I was a little bit about the opposite side of the coin. A lot of the leaders, and especially women I work with that are high level leaders, they're struggling sometimes to find their voice at all. And they're struggling to speak up in a meeting or share what they know for multitude of reasons. How would you help someone who is really struggling with that, who is really looking to find a way to be more visible, to use their communication skills in a more powerful, assertive way?
We can always practice using that public speaking voice in our private conversations. In fact, advice that I'm asked for probably more often than any other, and you may get this question a lot as well, Anna, with as much speaking as you do. How do I get rid of the ums and the ahs? People are obsessed with
I'm still
this
working on it.
They're obsessed with this idea of perfect polish, which actually that's kind of a separate, I'm just going to make one quick comment, but then get back to the question. I don't know that ums and ahs in formal presentations are the worst thing in the world. I think that there's a smattering of it that feels very personable and conversational and natural. So I don't think it's a great goal to just try to be this perfect robot. We're not robots. We're not chat. We're not Claude. We're not those things. We're robots. Just be human. I feel like that is...
Antoinette, do you know how many people just exhaled? They were like, okay. Oh, great. Thank you. I agree with you. I think it does add a layer of authenticity, and it sounds like a real conversation.
It sounds like a real conversation. And when people ask me that question, how do I get rid of the ums and the ahs? I'm like, if you're really committed to doing that, the place for you to pay attention is in your everyday conversation. How often are you relying on filler language to fill the silence? That's where you practice it. And that's where you master it, because oftentimes whatever conversational tendencies we have in very normal, casual, everyday conversations is magnified when we're in front of a room and nerves are high. For instance, if we curse a lot every day, sometimes it becomes very difficult when you're standing up in front of a group and you're feeling anxious and nervous to keep those tendencies from welling up because they're so second nature to you. So if at any point you feel like you're trying to tame whatever it is, filler language, profanity, whatever, the time to do that work is in the everyday conversation. And I would say the same is true for anyone who's trying to build up their confidence in front of a formal audience. Build up your confidence in the everyday conversation. Do the work there. Think about preparing before you say things, preparing a set of thoughts or a set of points that you want to make, and then practicing that in everyday conversation so that when you get tapped on to go in front of the group, you have more of those habits that are already built in and kind of committed to muscle memory, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And in all the years that you've been coaching and training and teaching communication and presentation skills, and what do you think is the most common struggle people have with presenting or public speaking? And is there a difference? Is presenting different than public speaking?
No, I don't think I would delineate between presenting and public speaking. I think for all intents and purposes, that's the same thing. Where I tend to draw different lines and put things in different categories is presenting versus facilitating, which presenting is very one way and facilitating is very two way, right? So those two things come to mind. I don't know that I would draw that hard distinction between the two. And now I'm forgetting what your question was.
What is the biggest challenge people have with public speaking? If you could think about all the conversations you've had over the years, what seems to be the common denominator for so many people?
I think there might be two.
Okay.
So if you'll allow me that.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know that they're related necessarily. One thing I've noticed about a lot of folks is related to what we just talked about, which is not enough preparation, not enough thought time. Someone along the way in my journey wrote on a random blog post, so I can't even really cite necessarily who it was that said it, but they said, great public speaking is a result of great thinking. And I don't know that many of us make time in our day to really think and process just about the world in general, to commit our thoughts to some sort of medium, such as paper, for instance, or, computer typing it out. I don't know that we really do the work to make sure our thinking is very clear. And I think sometimes the words that come out then reflect that lack of clarity as well. So I think that's one part of it. And that's related to sort of the preparation. For some people, they literally don't prepare at all. And I understand that. Some of us are incredibly talented at getting up in front of a group and spontaneously coming up with something that sounds halfway reasonably decent and offers value to the audience. The problem is that that's not, for most of us, a 100% of the time situation. So we rely on charm when the right words are not coming and we didn't prepare, and then we kind of make an excuse not to prepare again. So I would say clear thinking, preparation, that's probably one side of it. Now, interestingly, I think a lot of folks then can be challenged by the other side of it, which is the overthinking, the overanalysis, and occasionally the over-preparation. Oftentimes, those aren't the same people, right? So it's either you're in the group
of that.
Yeah, exactly. You're in the group that doesn't prepare enough, or you're maybe in the group that over prepares. And
Yeah.
so some of the conversations we have in the Train the Trainer workshops are very practical.
Yeah.
How do you know when you're prepared enough without being overdone and in your head about this presentation?
Yeah, I mean, how much of this is really about mindset? I know we talk about mindset a lot in so many conversations, and it really is, I think, the inner dialogue you're having with yourself before you have it with anyone else.
I don't know if I'm the guest to talk about this one because I think I do get in my head a lot.
Really?
Oh yeah, I think that public speaking is a great opportunity to get out of your head and into action, and to let other factors inform your experience and not just what's going on up here. It's about, let's try things and let's see what the response is, and then let's adjust our approach accordingly. It's much more action oriented to me. It can be more action oriented, and I try to encourage people for it to be more action oriented. You literally just went through this workshop third
I
time,
did.
fourth time?
Well, yeah, it was my third time with you for
Yeah.
Train the Presenter, and
Right.
each time I was in a different place in my career and in my
Yes.
life, and I've learned something new each time. This last time, I think I shared with you too in the group, it was really for me more about the prep and more
Mhm.
about crafting what I want to say. I'm very
Mhm.
fortunate to be someone who can speak very off the cuff, and I
Mhm.
believe authentically, and if it's something that I know, I'm able to just get into it. And I also am
Mhm.
someone who is comfortable in front of a room. I can command
Right.
a room, and I feed off energy, and all of those things are great. And I can still see how I can elevate myself as a presenter and a trainer, as a speaker and as a trainer, with taking the time to really look at the skill behind crafting the presentation,
Mhm.
the architecture
Well,
of it.
you probably have experienced then, with it being your third time through, that each time we've gotten better
Yeah,
at
sure.
writing something that is actionable. And I think you heard me say this last time too. If you're still writing, now is the time to practice. I want to encourage you to turn the page, move on, and get into the practice phase so that you can start to smooth out the bumps and add a little of that polish that I know you want to this presentation.
Yes.
I just think ultimately getting into action with it is the way to go.
Yeah. Of course, we will not mention any names, but have you ever had a student or a client you've tried to work with and help that in your mind you're saying they really shouldn't be speaking publicly? We all
Mhm.
have that potential.
Wow, that's a great question. I've seen thousands of people through these workshops. I've evaluated my last calculation, probably between 5 and 6,000
That's incredible.
presentations. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
I think there has only been one person that I wondered whether they'd be able to improve. Because to me, the question is not, should I be up there? Does this person deserve to be in front of the room? It's, can they get better? And I think there was only one person that I just had my doubts. And it was less about their ability to speak and more about that mental organization that's required, right? So we talked about clear thinking being a necessary precursor to really clear speaking. And this was someone who I genuinely wasn't sure had the desire to sort out what was happening in their head so that what was coming out was understandable, actionable.
I think you're someone who is so encouraging and inspiring and patient, and you really help all of us understand the process in a way that can be more personalized for us. So I think that alone shows how much potential you can create with someone. And I think it's also great to know and encourage anyone listening that we all have our own way. We all have our own way of communicating. We all have our own way of connecting. You don't have to be like anyone else. You have your own ability, and that we can all improve. We can all
Right.
raise the bar a little bit, or improve our skill set around it. And so I think that's inspiring. I'm sure there are people listening going, oh, there's hope for me yet.
Can I also clarify one thing? Because this ties into a
Yeah.
part of the question you had asked before. For this particular person, I don't even know that I thought there was a cognitive issue going on for
Right.
them. I think it was a mindset issue for them.
Sure. They just need to kind of let go and maybe get out of their own way a little bit.
It was beyond that. It was like they came with a message they wanted to deliver, and it wasn't necessarily a message that the audience was there to hear. I don't think it was a message that brought value to the audience based on the audience's response. But I don't think that the speaker was ready to hear that. They wanted to show up and deliver what they wanted to deliver.
Yeah.
I'm not one to sit around and obsess over mindset. I think, again, I'm big on take the action and let the result inform you.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, you know what I've said?
That's my short answer.
I believe, this is for my belief, is that if I jump, the net will show up. So what I mean by that is it's in the doing that we build confidence. And I've been talking about that a lot here on this show too. I think that some of us have been programmed to think that we have to muster up our confidence so we can take action. But it's really every time you try, every time you fail, every time you tweak it, every time you learn something, you're building your confidence as you go. And so you just have to do it sometimes, and you have to suck a little bit, and then you have to get better, and you just keep learning from each of those opportunities. So I want to shift gears a little bit to the topic of training, because I have always been very passionate about training. And as much as I love coaching, I know, and as much as I've enjoyed being a leader and an entrepreneur, there's something for me that happens when I get to teach people some new thoughts and ideas, or I get to facilitate the conversations that allow that to start happening. And that's really where I get excited, is in the collaborative space and where people get to share ideas. And I understand what you mean by that idea of facilitating. And you had said something in the last workshop about training and how powerful training can be. So I want to open that up a little bit, because I think, again, in a world where there is a lot of technology available and AI and things that we can plug into to learn, whether it's a hard skill or a soft skill, there is something invaluable about the human connection in that process. So what is your take on training in 2026? And why is it still important for us to have skilled trainers who understand the value of facilitating in lieu of always going to AI to get the answer?
Ooh, that's good.
Coming from Antoinette Perez, I feel so special right now.
Too much. That's very substantial, what you're asking. I am going to take one pass and see if this approach is useful to either of us, and then we'll just kind of craft it from there.
Yeah.
I do think that classroom instruction is fundamentally human. I definitely believe that there are people who will do better in that sort of environment as opposed to reading or being spoken at by a lifeless bot. There is really something about that human connection. And again, if you just go back 5 years to early pandemic, we know that in-person connection, that in-person synergy, I can't believe I just said that word, is like something that most of us want, right? We crave that as humans. I don't know if you have noticed this, but I'm on Instagram a fair amount. That's probably out of all the social media platforms, my favorite one to consume content on. And I remember saying last year that the day that I could no longer tell the difference between an AI generated reel and an actual reel was the day I was going to leave Instagram.
And
I'm still there.
But it is getting harder, right?
It is getting harder. I think that the believability factor is the part that leads me to believe that for many folks, this personal connection, the human connection, will ultimately matter in ways that we're not really thinking about or talking about right now. Even look at the little box right here. I misspelled my name when I entered the recording studio.
I was wondering about that. I'm like, is this something cool I didn't know about?
Nope, I didn't notice until you hit record, and now I can't go back and edit it. But this is, again, like one little tiny sign for me that a human was here. There will be a podcast that comes out, Monday Morning Mojo, where I'm a guest and my name is misspelled during the entire thing. And it will just be a reminder to everyone that a human was here. I don't see these things as bad at all. I think that they are great markers of who we are. And it'll be funny the day that AI starts making mistakes to replicate looking human. I'm sure we'll get there at some, future phase of this. But what does it mean for training? I don't know that I'm scared personally that in-person instructor-led training is going anywhere. I do think that right now, especially in the real estate industry, we're seeing so much volatility in general and unpredictability. Training budgets are getting squeezed, and this is not the only industry where that's happening. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we are doing the best job that we can in bringing the most to the people that bother to come out and spend time with us.
Yeah.
Outside of that, though, that's the work, right?
It is the work. It is definitely. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons why I thought about the question is I wrote a course on leadership that I really enjoyed teaching in the corporate setting. And of course, I did research. And of course, I have a lot of things built into it that are inherently, I think, about the structure of leadership. And I also incorporate some of my own personal stories about leadership. And I have a lot of time built into the course where the group can get into some real world leadership conversations and role plays and things like that. And so those are some of the moments that I believe only humans can facilitate, and that being in a room together, especially if it can be in person, there's just a different energy than when we watch a webinar or we type a question into now AI. Used to be Google all the time. And so I was just curious what your thoughts were about the art of being a really good trainer, especially a trainer of adults who are looking to develop their skills and raise their awareness around certain things that are not as operational, that are more, I guess we call them the softer skills.
I mean, I guess if I were to add a PS to that comment about how to make training uniquely human, how to make what we're bringing unique from what AI can, there are still areas where AI cannot perform as well as humans can. Intuition is one of them. Large language models can predict the next most likely word to be used, but there is no actual intuition. So to your point, if we're with a group of people and we're really tuned into the energy in the room, we should be able to have intuition about where to go, where to spend the most amount of time, what's going to bring the most value to this group, right? So intuition, I think, is part of it. Context is another. Bringing our full human experience, our entire background to bear on what we're doing together is something that,
can't happen.
Robots can't do.
Right.
They have access to so much, but they don't know what's the most important thing to bring. So our ability to curate and to add context is another one of those things. And then, of course, I haven't read much on this recently, but as recently as 6 months ago, there were still studies out there that showed that AI is just not capable of higher order. Large language models are not capable of higher order problem solving. So the more complex of challenges we're able to address and solve and provide roads to solutions for, I think the more we're going to be able to delineate the value of what we do versus what the robots bring.
Yeah, I agree. And not that we wanted to turn this into a conversation about AI, but it just seems like we kind of went down that rabbit hole, as we all do, I think, a lot of times around these conversations. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk to you about something else that I think really is grounded in communication. I talk a lot about identity on the podcast lately, especially, and I believe communication is how we express ourselves, but I think it also is a reflection of how we see ourselves. And it's also about how we can learn to transform and make, some pivots around our own identity. So I'm going to turn it on you now. After being in this career for the last 20 plus years, where are you today versus when you started 20 years ago in terms of your own professional identity around being an instructor and a coach and someone who really leads others in this way of expressing themselves?
Early in my career, I was definitely, my entry point into training and public speaking was as a corporate person. I was literally an employee when I first started doing this work. And then I became a contractor and built my own company. I do think early I had been very cautious about my image and my reputation. And it was very easy for me, actually, even predating my time in training. Since I was a kid, I've always been called professional. And I think that's a really positive thing if you're 21 and you don't know what you're doing when you've already been called that, but you don't really know what it means. And growing into that as my first identity and feeling like I could really inhabit that was important for me personally. So it was knowing how to look the part and act the part and make how I showed up, even outside of the training room, the same as the experience that you got from me in the training room.
Mm.
I did find over time that became so second nature to me, and also wasn't necessarily reflective of other sides of me that you might see if you ran into me at a restaurant casually, socially, right? I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. So actually, let me just address this. Sometimes people in leadership positions, they'll come to the workshops and they'll, ask about the purity of their reputation and how they represent themselves in front of a room and how well they're representing their brand and those kinds of things. And I think when we do lead a group, we have an opportunity to show them facets of ourselves. And as long as all of the facets that they're seeing are genuine to who we are, then I think we're being completely authentic. It doesn't mean they're going to see all the sides of us
Right.
all the time. So that said, I got some feedback a few years ago that kind of stuck with me. And I've gotten really good at taking feedback over the years. I have a system, I've got a process. I know what to act on and what I'm just kind of let go. I know what to take seriously and I know what not to take seriously. So this comment didn't feel very throwaway to me. But I had seen a lot of comments about, how perfect my delivery was and all those kinds of things. And then this person wrote an evaluation that said, Antoinette is the perfect trainer. She's almost too perfect, like a robot. And I turned that comment over in my head for weeks. I think I might have stayed up late thinking about it a couple of times.
We've all been there. That one comment that just gets in
Yeah.
our head. Yeah.
That one piece of feedback. And
Why do you think that stuck with you?
because I knew that there was probably some part of it that I could acknowledge was true from that person's perspective, but I didn't know how to resolve it. I didn't know how to address it. So back to this whole, I had perfected this professional persona. I think that was a turning point for me in realizing that this professional persona was bigger than that facet was of who I am as a total person. And one of the reasons why, and I still maintain this today, I genuinely believe this in my heart. My brain is really messy and chaotic. I'm thinking about 7,000 things at the same time at any given moment. And not all of it comes out, right? I don't talk about it. I don't express it, but I'm managing so many things in my brain that I think for me, being that professional person that was always prepared and always focused and all of those things was me protecting you from all of this chaos that was going on in my head. It was me making sure that I wasn't muddying things with the chaos that was going on in my head. But then I thought, you know what? This is like the age of AI and people are craving things that feel more human.
Yeah.
And what better way for me now at my tender age, which I think at the time I was pretty close to 50, right? I was like, I know I'm more than just the professional side of me. And so why not let people see the chaos and the mayhem? And so I started adjusting that knob and adding other parts of me into every presentation, every workshop, everything. And it has definitely felt more fulfilling for me. And I think people feel like they're connecting with me more, which is interesting because they've always connected.
Because I feel like, and I don't even get to see you or talk to you on a regular basis, but I feel like I know you have this very fun loving side to you, right? I think people really do connect with our authenticity. And I'm a Virgo. So I try to be, I've spent a lot of years trying to be a people pleaser and they just really like to see the messy and they like to
Hmm.
see the human side of us. So I think you sharing that is great here. And while you were talking, I thought of two more episodes we could have you and I together. One on the whole subject of feedback, what you do. And, as a
Yeah.
coach, we're always giving feedback, but when you're teaching, when you're in the modality of teaching something like train the presenter and the advanced class that you teach also, and everything in between, you're giving a lot of feedback. And I did
Hmm.
a podcast probably a year ago, giving and receiving feedback like a boss, because that's a big part of our
Hmm.
world as leaders. So I think we could have a good conversation about that.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that I think we could talk about, I already forgot. See, that's what happens. I have 17 million things going through my head. So
Don't protect us from your chaos.
you,
Show us.
we'll do it again. So this has been great. I could talk to you like this for forever. I know we're going to
Same.
run out of time. So let's do a couple of fun things, couple of
Okay.
questions that I call the lightning round. So
Hmm.
the first one, just to break the ice, coffee or tea?
Ooh, I like both. I go more for coffee typically than tea,
Yeah, me
but it can be seasonal. Like I can drink more tea in
too.
the summer and more coffee in the winter. But yeah,
Definitely.
both.
Would you describe yourself as an extrovert or an introvert?
Again, I think I'm like right in the middle.
Yeah. So
The work,
people say they're an extroverted introvert, where you
yeah,
put a lot of energy in being extroverted at times, but
I think I have both.
Mhm.
And the work that you and I do leans very extroverted. It kind of requires those qualities. And when I do it, I don't feel like I'm pulling from the inner parts of myself. It feels very natural to me. And then also, the pandemic taught me I can be a very, very comfortable introvert, super happy alone, doing my own thing, not needing anyone else around me.
yeah. What would be the one word you would use to describe you?
Oh gosh, just one. Mm. This is terrible because it comes from a training icebreaker when I was a learner in somebody else's classroom, but it was pick a word to describe yourself that starts with the same letter as your first name.
Yes.
And so mine,
And
it
ours
is
are all
true though.
A's, which is not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. There's a lot of A words out there, right? But the word that I chose then and I think still applies now is active.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, last question. This is Monday Morning Mojo, which is inspired during COVID, and we've talked about that a few times. So, what does mojo mean to you? It's a two-part question.
Ooh.
So I'll start there. What does mojo mean to you?
I think it means focused energy,
I think the
focused,
literal
proactive
definition
energy.
has something to do with magic. It's like this, harnessing this high energy. And
Mhm.
so, what do you do to get your mojo back if you feel like you've lost it temporarily?
Mm. Part of me being active is that there's always energy. And I'm not trying to say that in like I'm just wired differently kind of way. I think my energy level is just always high. It's not always physical energy. I would say mainly it's like mental energy.
Mhm.
But also I think again, we're not meant to be robots. And when we feel things dipping, I just go with it. If I feel energy waning, let it wane. Give myself a time. There's seasons and cycles in nature for a reason, and we are natural beings. So I don't fight it. I just go with it.
That's a great answer. I think a lot of people work to try to turn it around and fight with it a little bit. So you're just feeling your feels for that moment. I think that's great. So, is there a question I didn't ask that you wish I had?
No, I loved this conversation. And that one question you asked, I can't wait to watch again in the replay. That was a great question.
And we'll have to talk about our next episode together. I'm sure there could be another one.
Absolutely.
So, Antoinette, if anyone would like to learn more about you and the work that you do, or working with you specifically, how can they find you?
My website is probably the best place to go. So that's rockontinyrebel.com.
What's the meaning behind Rock On Tiny Rebel? I've wanted to ask you that for probably 10 years.
Is there a meaning? It has been kind of a personal brand that's been out there.
The meaning? No. Rock On Tiny Rebel.
Yeah, probably 10 years ago, I went through this whole, identity branding thing, program process, whatever. Really what it alludes to is that I'm pretty rebellious and counter current wisdom in a lot of ways, but always in really small, tiny ways. They add up.
I love that. Antoinette, you're awesome. Thank you for being on the show. And we will probably have you back. I can feel it already. So I appreciate you so much. You've taught me so much. So thank you for
You're
taking
the
time
best.
out. No, you are. And
Thank you, Anna.
you guys are too. So thank you for joining me week after week. And I'm sure you found some really good juicy nuggets of wisdom here. So be sure to share this episode with someone who could use it too. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.